The courtroom was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels thick, heavy, like it's waiting for something to happen. Everyone was seated, some flipping through notepads, others with their hands clasped on their laps. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above, bouncing off polished wood and cold marble. The judge had not yet entered, and the air carried a strange anticipation. She sat there in the front row, the woman he called a nobody. Her name was Angela Monroe, and although she didn't have a lawyer's badge or political status, her posture was dignified. Her natural hair was tied back into a neat puff, her suit modest yet pressed, and her eyes, those told stories of resilience. Across from her sat Richard Halston, a man who wore his suit like armor, smugly, arrogantly. He was the CEO of a mid-sized corporation being sued for discriminatory hiring practices and workplace harassment. Angela had been an employee there for 3 years before she was unjustly fired. But it wasn't just about wrongful termination anymore. It was about what he said, what he dared to say when he thought no one of consequence was listening. In a deposition video that would soon be played for the court, Richard had muttered under his breath, but just loud enough for the microphone to catch. She's just a black woman, a nobody. She's not going to win anything. That one sentence. That one ugly, ignorant sentence. It wasn't supposed to be part of the official record, but it was. The legal team had insisted it be admitted. As the judge walked in, the room stood up. Honorable Judge Miriam Keller, a woman known for her sharp mind, unshakable ethics, and a soul carved from justice, took her seat. She adjusted her glasses and nodded once. Be seated. The attorneys began their statements, but the room remained tense. Whispers moved across rows like low wind. People kept looking at Angela, trying to read her expression, but she didn't flinch. Her silence was not weakness, it was strategy. Then the screen lit up. The deposition video began. Dry legal talk, time-stamped footage, lawyers asking about protocols, policies, emails, and then the moment came. That sentence. She's just a black woman, a nobody. It echoed, not because it was loud, but because of the weight it carried. Gasps quietly swept the courtroom. Even some members of Halston's own team looked stunned. A reporter's pen stopped midword. One juror leaned back, visibly shaken. Angela didn't move. She just blinked once. Judge Keller's lips pressed into a line. A few seconds later, Halston's attorney tried to recover. Your Honor, the comment was off-record but Judge Keller raised her hand, firm but calm. Enough. The room froze. She looked directly at Richard Halston, and for a moment, it was as if every person in that courtroom vanished, except him and her. There are words, she began slowly, that reveal the core of a person's character. And when those words are spoken in a court of law, they carry weight. Legal or not, official or not, they matter. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes burned with authority. To look at a human being and call them a nobody, simply because of the color of their skin or the position they hold, is not only unacceptable, it is vile. Someone from the gallery wiped away a tear. Angela finally exhaled. Judge Keller continued. Let the record reflect that this court does not recognize nobodies. There are no nobodies in this courtroom. There are citizens, humans, and truths. There was no gavel bang, just silence. A different kind now, one that wasn't waiting anymore, one that had just been woken up. This was no longer just a trial. This was a turning point. Angela walked up to the stand with calm determination. The clicking of her low heels echoed in the room, and for a moment, even the sound seemed to carry weight. People leaned in just slightly. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. Not the legal back and forth, not the lawyer's arguments, but her voice. She raised her right hand and swore in. Please state your name for the record, the attorney asked. Angela Monroe, she said, voice steady. And your occupation? I'm currently unemployed. I was previously employed at Halston Tech as a project coordinator. And why are we here today, Ms. Monroe? She looked at the jury. Not the lawyer, not the judge, not even Halston. Straight at the jury. Her voice didn't rise, didn't tremble, but it reached everyone. Because someone decided that I didn't matter. Because someone with power thought I was disposable. Because I was black and a woman, and not in a position high enough for them to think I had the strength to speak. Every word fell like a stone in still water. No theatrics, no dramatics, just truth. Clean, sharp, unfiltered. She began detailing what her job was like, the long hours, the overlooked ideas, the meetings she was excluded from. She spoke of how junior white male employees were promoted while she was told to be patient and not too ambitious. But it was what came next that broke the courtroom's collective breath. She looked down at her hands, then back up. There was a day I left work crying. Not because someone yelled, not because I was insulted outright, but because I realized I was disappearing. My input meant nothing. My presence felt like an inconvenience. I was becoming invisible in a place where I gave everything. The jurors were still. Even Halston's team couldn't look her in the eyes. She continued, I spoke up once about a team lead taking credit for my work. The next week, I was pulled into HR. Not for him, for me. I was told I was too emotional and disruptive to the team dynamic. Her voice cracked just slightly, and for a second the mask slipped, not in weakness, but in humanness. I kept thinking if I just worked harder, kept my head down, followed the rules, I'd eventually be seen. But all that did was make me easier to ignore. And then came the pivot. But I'm not a nobody, and I never was. Her eyes met Judge Keller's, then floated across to Halston, then finally back to the jury. I'm a woman who came to work with integrity. I gave my time, my ideas, and my respect. And when I was mistreated, I didn't throw anger back. I brought truth, a pause. And maybe that's what scared him most. Not that I'd fight back, but that I'd tell the truth. The courtroom was utterly still. Even the air seemed like it had frozen, hanging on her every word. Halston shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable now. His cocky posture from earlier was gone. His chin dipped, his fingers fidgeted. This wasn't a PR crisis anymore. This was exposure. Angela's attorney gave her a soft nod, and with that, she rested her hands on the witness rail, looked once more at the faces around her, strangers, yet listeners, and simply said, Thank you. No need to grandstand. The message was delivered. Judge Keller turned to the jury. We'll recess for a short break, she said, her voice softer this time. Even she needed a breath. As Angela stepped down, people watched her not like she was fragile, but like she was fire. Controlled, graceful fire. And she hadn't just told her story. She had held up a mirror to every silent injustice that ever went unspoken in a workplace, in a courtroom, in the world. As the court reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted. Something unspoken lingered in the air, a new kind of weight. The kind that doesn't just press on your chest, but settles in your thoughts. Judge Keller re-entered, her robe trailing behind her like a shadow of authority and introspection. But this time, she didn't look like just a judge. She looked like a woman who had heard. She sat down slowly, eyes scanning the courtroom. Her gaze lingered just a moment longer on Angela, a subtle but unmistakable gesture. Then she looked to Halston, who, despite his tailored suit and polished shoes, now seemed small, smaller than anyone expected. Before the next witness could be called, Judge Keller did something unusual. She gently raised her hand, pausing the proceedings. There's something I need to say before we move forward, she said, voice even but layered with quiet power. The court clerk blinked in surprise. Attorneys looked up from their papers. Halston's face tightened. I have presided over many cases in my years on this bench, the judge continued. Some full of legal complexity, some full of emotion. But not often do I come across testimony like what we just heard. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Ms. Monroe, she turned toward Angela, you may not wear a title anymore. You may not have a corner office or a nameplate. But what you spoke in this courtroom was truth. And truth, in its purest form, is the most powerful thing that can be brought before the law. A hushed silence fell. A few in the gallery straightened in their seats. Angela didn't speak. She just held the judge's gaze with grace and quiet strength. Too often, Keller continued, our society puts value on volume, on aggression, on status. But we forget that dignity has a voice too, and it often speaks quietly. Today, I was reminded of that. She leaned slightly forward, addressing the entire room now. To the defendant, Mr. Halston, the law will determine the outcome of this case based on evidence and testimony. But what cannot be debated here is what was heard by every soul in this room. A woman was erased not because she was incapable, but because someone with influence believed her silence was easier to maintain than her presence. Gasps were held in, not spoken aloud, but inward, the kind that travel through the chest and lodge behind the eyes. Let this serve as a reminder. The judge said firmly that dignity belongs to every person who walks into a workplace, regardless of color, gender, or title. And when it is stripped away, the courtroom becomes the sanctuary for its restoration. Halston shifted again. His attorney whispered something, but his lips didn't move. He was staring, not at Angela now, but at the judge, unsure whether to feel embarrassed, humbled, or terrified. Perhaps a cocktail of all three. Judge Keller then sat back, adjusted her glasses, and said, "We may now proceed." It wasn't long, but it didn't need to be. Her words landed not like a ruling, but like a reckoning. As the gavel moved forward with the rhythm of justice, people would talk for weeks, months even about that moment. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was rare. A judge had spoken from the seat of authority, not only with legal command, but with moral clarity. People watching from the back of the courtroom wiped away quiet tears. Not from sadness, but from relief, because someone had finally seen the unseen, had named the unnamed. Angela wasn't just heard that day. She was honored. And in that courtroom, for the first time in a long time, the walls didn't just echo law. They echoed justice. The trial ended, but the ripple effects were just beginning. As soon as the court adjourned for the day, news outlets began circling like birds sensing a storm. The clip of Judge Keller's statement was already making waves on social media, shared with captions like, "This judge said what we all needed to hear," and "respect, dignity, justice." Finally, by the next morning, hashtags were trending. Hashtag, "She was never a nobody." Hashtag, "Judge Keller speaks." Hashtag, "Angela Monroe deserves justice." Angela hadn't expected any of it. She hadn't come to court for sympathy. She had walked in to speak her truth. But what she got was resonance. It was as if every woman who'd ever been silenced, every black professional overlooked or underestimated, saw a piece of themselves in her poise, in her pain, in her courage. Interviews were requested. Podcasts reached out. Even a major news outlet wanted to do a special feature on Angela Monroe, the face of workplace injustice. But Angela, ever composed, chose carefully. "I don't want to be a celebrity," she told one reporter gently. "I just want people to know they're not alone." Meanwhile, Halston's company wasn't faring so well. What had started as a quiet case of wrongful dismissal turned into a PR nightmare. Shareholders demanded answers. Clients pulled contracts. Internal emails were leaked showing subtle and not so subtle discrimination patterns within the executive team. The board moved quickly. Halston was placed on immediate leave. A public apology was issued, though many could tell it was crafted by lawyers rather than remorse. The damage was done. His name, once associated with luxury and innovation, now floated through headlines tied to disgrace. But even in this fallout, Angela remained composed. She didn't gloat. She didn't post cryptic captions or bask in the collapse of someone else's tower. She simply carried herself, as she always had, with integrity. And perhaps that's what made her victory even more powerful. The court later ruled in her favor. Not just a settlement, but a formal recognition of wrongful termination, discrimination, and intentional emotional harm. It was more than compensation. It was validation. Angela walked out of the courthouse on the final day, holding the hand of her younger sister, who had come to support her. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. But what the lenses captured most clearly wasn't the headlines. It was the way Angela smiled. Not with pride, with peace. Later that week, Angela received a handwritten note, not from a network or an organization, but from a janitor who had worked at her old company. It read, "You may not have known me, but I saw how they treated you, and I never forgot it. Watching you stand tall gave me the courage to apply somewhere new. They hired me. Thank you for reminding me what strength looks like." Angela folded the note with tears in her eyes. Quiet tears, the kind that come not from sadness, but from knowing you made a difference. In the end, Angela never asked to be a symbol. But sometimes, the world chooses its symbols not by noise, but by grace. And grace was something she had in abundance.